Mr. Marston, I've been hearing about your plans.
Have you, Miss McFarland?
Yes, from Lee Johnson, to settle here and build a life for yourself.
I'm afraid those aren't my plans. See, I already have a life. Well, I had one, and I'm trying to reclaim it. Or maybe what you could say is I had two, and I'm trying to end one of them so the other can survive.
You do so love to talk in riddles, Mr. Marston. Do you do that, I wonder, as a substitute for having anything interesting to say?
Probably, Miss McFarland.
Oh, call me Bonnie, you fool. Call me Bonnie.
It's been said before, but storytelling in games as a medium is mediocre, bad even in most cases. Part of this is due to how games are developed. The writing usually has to take a backseat to the gameplay or environments chosen, and often feels like the afterthought that it is. But this isn't always an inherently negative thing. One of the biggest appeals to gaming is the variety within the medium that it offers, and I've often found that satisfying gameplay keeps me playing a title much longer than a well-crafted story does. What's interesting though is that when games do focus on creating a rich and thought-provoking narrative, the overall experience transcends other mediums in my opinion. The biggest advantage games have in telling interesting narratives is their ability to create a relationship between the player and character on screen. It's difficult to articulate this in a summary, but taking control of a character builds a unique connection that isn't present in books or film. The game may still dictate the direction of the plot, but it's the player who experiences it through their independent control of the character. For this reason, it's remarkably easy to empathise and grow attached to the character, because in many ways, the player is visualising themselves as the protagonist, which is often reflected by their personal playstyle. But the connection between player and character doesn't have to extend only as far as the protagonist. The Last of Us is often cited as the go-to example of well-crafted writing in games, and there are a multitude of reasons for this. One of the ways that it accomplishes a connection with multiple characters is by giving the player control of both leading characters where the story sees fit. Because the plot centres around the familial relationship dynamic between two strangers, as their bond strengthens, it's depicted from both of their perspectives, so forces the audience to empathise with them equally. Perhaps more importantly, the gameplay works in harmony with the gritty and destructive nature of the story. Despite the overall ruthlessness and survival-oriented violence that is prolific throughout the story, it's difficult not to empathise with a father figure who becomes a villain. I don't think the same level of understanding for his motives would be easily accomplished without having played out the actions yourself and experiencing the story in the way he does. A game that does this less successfully is GTA 5, perhaps because it tries to balance all three protagonists at once, rather than letting the story provide the natural moments where control of multiple characters would be appropriate. The scarcity of these moments in The Last of Us is what makes them impactful. But you don't need to be in control of every character to care about them. The consequences your actions have on them is equally powerful in creating this connection. The way you decide to approach different circumstances and the outcome, whether that be success or failure, feels very personal. Games like Mass Effect and Heavy Rain accomplish this by introducing permanence to these failures. Characters that die because of you remain dead. This leads me on to what I think is the most powerful tool games have in creating emotional depth: pacing, which to me is the key to creating memorable moments. In games, while cutscenes dictate the pacing of the dialogue and exposition, the moments made to be suspenseful are often during gameplay. This means before a particularly grueling boss fight, or after witnessing a favourite companion die, when you want to let go, or when you've built up the courage to advance to the next testing stage, you have control over when that moment finishes. Being able to cater the pacing to your own specific preferences allows games to impact audiences emotionally in a way that is unique and powerful. And yet, there are running jokes within the community of the many failures developers make when trying to pace a game properly to create any sense of urgency. It's for this reason that I'm so in love with Red Dead Redemption. Red Dead demonstrates how good storytelling can be accomplished through interesting characters, an understanding of how pacing should be controlled in games, while balancing this alongside promoting open player freedom. Unlike The Last of Us, which is constrained to a linear format, and therefore has the advantages of chronological storytelling, Red Dead and other open world titles suffer from player freedom and the ability to interact with the world and smaller stories within it, regardless of the bigger plot. Usually, this leads to situations where the writers have tried to make the player feel a sense of urgency, but they are still given the freedom to spend days doing activities or errands that contribute nothing toward the central goal without consequence. I'm impressed that Red Dead doesn't try to do this. As an alternative to creating false urgency, the game tells a story of the people inhabiting the world. You experience the small period of their lives that you come across, so the choices you make as a player to power through the main missions or spend time exploring the world and the smaller stories that lay within it don't conflict with one another. While the objective you're given is obviously important, the slow pacing, mixture of menial and dangerous tasks, and the many long, slow horse rides suggest that an emphasis has been made to make you soak in the people and world around you. It sounds simple enough, and yet there are still so many open world games that suffer from the cognitive dissonance created by implementing urgency incorrectly. Now, obviously, the subject of storytelling is much broader than I can condense into just a few minutes, but I wanted to conclude on a quote that truly captures why I think games are so well suited to it. Roger Ebert once said about film, "We are all born with a certain package. We are who we are, where we were born, who we were born as, how we were raised. We're kind of stuck inside that person, and the purpose of civilization and growth is to be able to reach out and empathise a little bit with other people. And for me, the movies are like a machine that generates empathy. It lets you understand a little bit more about different hopes, aspirations, dreams and fears. It helps us to identify with the people who are sharing this journey with us." And I think that games as a medium share and go beyond this ability. For me personally, empathy is so easy to accomplish in games because you are literally putting yourself in the shoes of another character. This isn't to say that many games accomplish it well, but in the instances that do, it's an experience that can't be emulated by other mediums. Comparing them to film, for instance, the audience member is an onlooker, a viewer. In games, this is taken a step further. Having direct control over a character not only lets you see how a person would make decisions in another environment, but in good games forces you to make them yourself. They still have a long way to come in most cases, and in many ways new releases fall short of accomplishing anything truly thought-provoking, at least in big AAA releases. And this is okay if the design benefits this, but in games that try to achieve meaningful dialogue and plot, or thinly veiled allegories of contemporary issues, it's important that developers stop emulating other art forms like film and instead use this medium to their advantage. The best stories I've witnessed in games so far have been designed in ways that the gameplay complements and enhances the story being told. By doing so, they have become by far my favourite way to experience storytelling.
Take it easy. Oh, fuck. Let him go. You fucking drop him. Shit.